What if your regular 9 to 5 suddenly became a life or death situation? How do everyday workplaces turn into the setting of unimaginable tragedies? In this video, we're diving into some of the most disturbing workplace deaths ever recorded. Stories that prove danger can strike when you least expect it. From freak accidents to shocking oversights, these real-life cases will leave you questioning just how safe the workplace really is. And the biggest question of all, could these disasters have been prevented? On June 2, 2022, what should have been just another workday turned into a nightmare beyond imagination. Stephen Dierck, a 39-year-old father of 3, had barely begun his new job at the Caterpillar foundry in Mapleton, Illinois. It was only his 9th day, a day filled with hope for the future, a fresh start to provide for his family. But by the time the shift was over, Stephen was gone. Not just gone, erased. Stephen wasn't just another worker. He was a family man, deeply devoted to his partner, Jessica Sutter, and their 3 young daughters, aged 4, 5, and 12. Living in Peoria, Illinois, he had taken this job to secure a better future for them. But little did he know, the very place he sought opportunity would become the site of his unthinkable final moments. The Caterpillar foundry was a behemoth of industry, melting up to 1,000 tons of iron daily, producing parts for heavy machinery. But behind its massive output was a lurking danger. A smelting facility running at 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit is no place for mistakes. One wrong move could mean instant death, and that's exactly what happened. It was just past 9:20 a.m. when Stephen was assigned a seemingly simple task: collect a sample of molten iron from the massive crucible, a vat containing liquid metal hot enough to melt a human body in seconds. There were no guardrails, no safety harness, no second chances. Then it happened. A misstep, a slip, a fraction of a second. Stephen fell, but he didn't fall completely. He landed partially inside the hellish cauldron. His lower body was instantly incinerated, while the rest of him remained, if only for a moment. In the blink of an eye, Stephen's existence was reduced to ash. Panic erupted through the facility. The Peoria County Coroner's Office and Sheriff's Department were called, but there was little left to recover. By 10:20 a.m., the entire foundry was evacuated. The iron inside the crucible cooled, and when the coroner's team returned hours later, they found only small bone fragments. The cause of death? Thermal annihilation. What's even more horrifying is that this tragedy was preventable. Following an investigation by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, it was determined that Caterpillar had failed to implement basic safety measures that could have saved Stephen's life. The fine? A mere $145,000. A slap on the wrist for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. To make matters worse, this wasn't the first death. Just 6 months earlier, another worker, Scott Adams, had also lost his life at the same facility. Employees had long voiced their concerns about the grueling conditions and unsafe practices, but their warnings went unheard. For Jessica Sutter, the pain was unbearable. She had lost the love of her life, and their daughters had lost their father, all because of negligence. She held Caterpillar directly responsible for his death, stating that the company showed no remorse, no accountability, and not a single offer of support to the family left behind. In the end, no criminal charges were filed, no justice was served, and for those who still walk the floors of the Caterpillar foundry, the question lingers: how many more lives will be lost before something changes? October 23, 2023, just another workday in downtown Boston. The city was alive with its usual rush, people heading to work, taxis weaving through traffic, and businesses opening their doors. High above the busy streets, Nicholas J. Marks, a 40-year-old window cleaner, prepared for another day on the job. He had been doing this for over 20 years, scaling some of the tallest buildings in the city. His job was dangerous, but Nicholas was an expert. He was careful, methodical, and respected by his colleagues. He knew the risks better than anyone. But on that day, something went terribly wrong. Nicholas was working on the 32-story office building at 100 Summer Street. As he prepared to lower himself into his bosun's chair, the safety anchor line, his lifeline, suddenly snapped. In an instant, the thing that was supposed to keep him secure failed. Nicholas fell. He plummeted toward the street below, hitting a parapet wall with such force that it left visible damage. Witnesses on the ground could do nothing but watch in shock. Some screamed. Others called 911, their hands shaking as they struggled to process what had just happened. Police and emergency responders arrived quickly. Officers roped off the area with yellow tape, while detectives took photographs of the scene. A single shoe, a shattered piece of plastic, and the broken bosun's chair were all that remained of Nicholas's final moments. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was something that never should have happened. An investigation by OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, revealed chilling details. Nicholas's employer, Sky Safety Incorporated, had failed him. The company had not properly inspected the safety equipment. It had allowed workers to use lifelines that were already worn and defective. It had not trained them to spot these dangers before they stepped over the edge. OSHA fined the company
$447,000.
SOC, swing citing repeated and willful violations of safety regulations. Inspectors concluded that Nicholas's death could have been prevented if the company had followed proper safety procedures, but Sky Safety denied responsibility. They insisted that they had spent money on new safety equipment and that Nicholas had been properly trained. They claimed that an unseen piece of metal had severed the rope, an unexpected hazard they had no way of preventing. But OSHA found no evidence to support that claim. Nicholas's death left behind a grieving family, including 2 young children who would never see their father again. His co-workers, many of whom had looked up to him for guidance, were left questioning their own safety. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was a warning, a reminder that when companies cut corners on safety, people die, and no worker should ever have to wonder if today will be their last. It was early September 2019, and Samuela Kira Wakayawa was chasing a new beginning. A former schoolteacher from Fiji, he had left behind a complicated past to start over in Australia. He was 40 years old, eager to build a better life, and determined to make the most of his fresh start. He had buried his father earlier that year. His marriage had fallen apart, but despite it all, he remained hopeful. He had found work with A1 Arbor Tree Services, a tree management company in Sydney. He shared photos of himself in front of the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, proof that he was embracing his new home. His friends and family back in Fiji saw a man smiling through the struggles, a man refusing to let life break him. But fate had other plans. The morning of September 7th, 2019, started like any other. It was a Saturday. Samuela was on a job at Cromer School in Linfield, Sydney, alongside 2 co-workers. His task was to feed branches into a wood chipper, a machine with a simple purpose but an unforgiving nature. He should not have been doing it by hand. The wood chipper's design specifications clearly stated that a mechanical log loader should be used. The machine itself bore a glaring warning: danger. Do not hand feed this machine. Severe injury or death can result. But those warnings were ignored. At some point, his co-workers stepped away to move a car. Samuela was left alone. He continued feeding the branches, unaware that every second brought him closer to disaster. Then, the unimaginable happened. In an instant, Samuela was pulled in. The monstrous machine did not hesitate, did not stop. His body disappeared into the in-feed hopper, dragged towards the roaring internal disc drum. There was no time to scream, no time to react. By the time his co-workers returned, it was already too late. Samuela was gone. Blood was splattered across the machine, a gruesome and undeniable sign of what had taken place. A sickening realization set in. They called the authorities, their hands shaking as they dialed, their voices barely able to form the words. Safe work. New South Wales launched an immediate investigation. What they found was infuriating. A 1 arbor tree. Services had ignored safety protocols. The wood chipper was not meant to be fed by hand. It had clear warnings against it. The company had failed to conduct a proper risk assessment, failed to ensure its equipment was being used safely, failed to provide adequate training. Worse still, the machine was already faulty before that morning, and yet they let him use it. The court found the company's negligence undeniable. The harm was entirely foreseeable, and the steps to prevent it had been simple, and yet they did nothing. At first, A1 Arbor Tree Services was fined $3 million. A guilty plea reduced the fine to $2.25 million, but no amount of money could bring back Samuela. Sophie Kotsis, New South Wales's Work, Health and Safety Minister, called it what it was, an avoidable tragedy. She reminded employers that workers should not have to fear for their lives just to earn a living, that safety laws exist for a reason, that one moment of carelessness, one ignored warning, can be the difference between life and death. Samuela's friends and family were left to mourn a man who had endured so much, only to have his life stolen from him in the cruelest way. He had been humble, hard-working, and always ready to make others laugh, and now he was gone. A man who had traveled thousands of miles for a second chance at life had instead met his death in a machine that never should have been running the way it was, all because someone chose to cut corners. Natalia Nemetz never saw it coming. It was just another day at the Slavyanka confectionery factory in Stary Oskol, Russia. October 20th, 2017. A day like any other, until it wasn't. Natalia was 36 years old, a hard-working factory worker and a devoted mother to her 10-year-old son, Ivan. She lived in the Belgorod Oblast region, working long hours to provide for her child. Like many others, she relied on the factory for her livelihood, never questioning the risks that came with the job. The Slavyanka confectionery factory was a major employer in the area, producing sweets and other confectionery products. Inside, massive industrial machines stirred and melted ingredients at dangerously high temperatures. These machines were essential to production, but they were also deadly if proper safety measures weren't followed. That morning, Natalia was assigned to clean one of the large caramel mixers. It was routine work, something she had likely done many times before, but something went terribly wrong. No one saw exactly how it happened. Maybe she slipped on the factory's slick floors. Maybe the stifling heat and fumes in the air made her dizzy. Maybe she lost her balance for just a second. All that mattered was this. She fell into the boiling caramel. And then the mixer started. Thick, molten caramel engulfed her body almost instantly. The temperature was far beyond the boiling point of water. The pain would have been unimaginable. But Natalia never even had the chance to scream. The intense heat likely knocked her unconscious almost immediately. The machine's sharp industrial blades, designed to stir and smooth the caramel, began turning. By the time her coworkers realized she was missing, it was too late. They searched the factory floor, calling her name, but their search ended in horror when they spotted something sticking out of the caramel-filled vat: her legs. The rest of her had already been consumed by the boiling mixture. Panic spread through the factory, but there was nothing anyone could do. Natalia Nemetz, a mother, a worker, and a fighter, was gone in the most unimaginable way possible. And yet, the nightmare didn't end there. The factory's management tried to cover it up. They warned the workers to stay silent. Anyone who spoke would be fired. There were no official reports, no public acknowledgement. They wanted the accident erased as if it had never happened. But the truth has a way of forcing itself into the light. A local newspaper, Komsomolskaya Pravda, uncovered the horrifying details. Investigators soon arrived and found serious safety violations at the factory. Workers had not been given proper training. Safety protocols had been ignored. Even worse, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the third worker death at the factory in just 1 year. Natalia's death wasn't just an accident. It was preventable. She had walked into work that morning expecting to go home to her son at the end of her shift. But because of negligence, she never got that chance. Her son, Ivan, was left without a mother. He was taken in by his aunt, forced to start over in a world that had just stolen the most important person in his life. There was no justice for Natalia. No undoing what had happened. Just a lesson. A brutal, gut-wrenching lesson about the cost of cutting corners, about the lives shattered by negligence, about a mother who walked into work one morning and never walked out. It was January 20th, 2021, a bitterly cold day in the Scottish borders. The wind cut across the open land, making the already demanding job of working outdoors even more grueling. But for Robert MacArthur, it was just another day on the job. At 32 years old, Robert was a seasoned, charged-hand linesman with 13 years of experience in the industry. He was respected by his colleagues, known for his reliability, dedication, and no-nonsense approach to work. Outside of his job, he was a passionate football fan, a die-hard Rangers supporter, and a man who took pride in providing for himself and his loved ones. He had operated heavy machinery countless times before, and on this day, he was tasked with moving a mobile elevated work platform, MEWP, near Long Formicus Barrier, working on a new electricity line. The MEWP was a powerful but potentially dangerous machine. It was designed to help workers reach difficult areas, particularly on rough terrain. It required precision, patience, and strict adherence to safety protocols. The terrain in this area was challenging, uneven, steep, and unpredictable. That's why there was an approved access route, one carefully selected to minimize risks. Robert and his colleagues were supposed to follow that designated path. It was the safest way down, but for reasons no one will ever fully understand, Robert made a fateful decision. He chose a shortcut. Maybe he thought it would save time. Maybe he was confident in his abilities. Maybe he had taken the shortcut before and thought he could handle it again. Whatever his reasoning, the choice would prove to be deadly. At first, the descent seemed manageable. The MEWP moved slowly down the steep 22 to 23 degree gradient, its heavy caterpillar tracks gripping the cold earth beneath it. But as Robert maneuvered the machine further down, the ground beneath the tracks became unstable. Then it happened. The MEWP suddenly lost traction. It slid over a raised sheep track, throwing its weight off balance. Robert must have felt the shift instantly, the stomach-churning realization that the machine was no longer under his control. The MEWP started to turn sideways, the metal tracks acting like skis on ice. It was now careening down the slope at a terrifying speed. Robert struggled to regain control, but there was nothing he could do. The MEWP struck a raised, compact tuft of grass, and in an instant, the massive machine tipped over. The weight of the vehicle was too great, and gravity took over. Robert wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The moment the machine toppled, he was violently thrown from the operator's cabin. He hit the frozen ground hard, likely dazed, possibly unconscious. But before he could react, the MEWP came crashing down on top of him. The force of the impact was catastrophic. Emergency services rushed to the scene, but there was nothing they could do. The injuries were too severe. Robert MacArthur, a man who had spent years mastering his craft, was gone. In the aftermath, a fatal accident inquiry was conducted at Jedburgh Sheriff Court. Sheriff Peter Patterson led the investigation, piecing together the final moments of Robert's life. The findings were as devastating as they were clear. Robert could have survived. The evidence showed that had he been wearing his seatbelt, he would have likely remained inside the MEWP during the accident. He might have suffered injuries, but he would have had a real chance at survival. Instead, he had been thrown into the machine's deadly path. The second, equally tragic conclusion was that the accident was entirely avoidable. If Robert had followed the designated access route, the one designed to prevent precisely this kind of disaster, he never would have lost control in the first place. The company, Keltbray Rail Limited, had done its part. Their systems were in place. Their safety procedures were clear. But in a moment of haste, Robert had taken a different path. Sheriff Patterson noted that Robert's personality might have played a role. He was a diligent worker, someone who wanted to get the job done efficiently. But sometimes, experience can lead to overconfidence. The "let's just get on with it" attitude that had made him a respected worker may have also led him to take an unnecessary risk. It's a haunting reminder of how even the smallest decisions can have life-altering consequences. one unfastened seatbelt, one shortcut, one moment of misplaced confidence. That was all it took. Robert's story is not just a tragedy, it's a lesson. Safety protocols exist for a reason. They are not suggestions. They are not inconveniences. They are the line between life and death. No matter how experienced someone is, no matter how many times they've done a job before, complacency can be fatal. For Robert MacArthur, a man who had built a career on precision and skill, it was a cruel irony. And for those who knew him, who worked alongside him, and who loved him, it was a loss that will never be forgotten.